So, where had we got to? Oh yes, I'd stopped at a campsite. What I hoped was a campsite where I was just looking forward to a cold beer and a warm shower. And instead, all I had was a car park and a sign that said, please take away your rubbish. So I buried myself deep in the woods to not be found by anybody, carried the bike over fallen logs and this, that and the other. Made it quite deep in, unrolled the sleeping bag and the bivvy bag, unrolled the sleeping mat, blew that up and got my head down. It was one of those nights where it was a bit warm, a bit hot, but if you open up the sleeping bag or the bivvy bag, ending up with midges and insects, and then regularly during the course of the night, things moving through the woods. And I was sort of lying there at 2 o'clock in the morning thinking, that is definitely a biped. You know, what biped crashes through the woods in France at 2 o'clock in the morning? So suffice to say, I didn't hang around there for too long. And at the very first signs of first light, I was pulling down the zip on the sleeping bag and getting my brew kit out and getting a cup of coffee on the go. And got away from there relatively early. And then cracked on with my journey. Entertainingly, I pulled out of the campsite and I don't know what time in the morning it was, 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, maybe 6. About half a mile away, there was a railway crossing and the barriers were up. There was a car stopped on the other side of the road, the other side of the barriers. And I thought, wonder what he's doing. And as I approached, he didn't move, just sat there. And as I cycled past him, I saw the chap was just asleep in the front of his car, and he's obviously got to the railway crossing. The barriers are down, so he's had to sit and wait for the barriers and just nodded off. And then the barriers had gone up and he stayed there. But, you know, he probably needed it. He probably needed it. Anyway, that was quite a day. A lot of long Roman roads, some intermittent rain at first, stopped and had a cuppa and a brew and dug all my gear out actually for a photograph, just to sort of document what I had with me, quite a lot of stuff, then cracked on. And ended up thinking, I'm in the middle of nowhere, could do with something to eat, could do with charging my batteries up, and getting some data, getting online, checking in with wifey, and went into a local town, which on approach, again, just looked absolutely deserted, as many of the places were in France. I mean, they must be suffering from quite remarkable rural depopulation. Anyway, cycled into this town, very, very beautiful lochs and Rutland lakes, reservoirs. Went up a little hill and was glad I did, because all of a sudden there was life and shops and a bar to back. I think I was smoking at the time and I managed to score some cigarettes. Don't tell my wife. And then just around the corner from the tobacco was a Turkish kebab shop. I knew it was a Turkish kebab shop because it had a big picture, a big blue eye outside. They call it the magic eye. It's there to ward off evil spirits, evil things. Stopped for a kebab, realised that I was sitting opposite BNP Paribas, idly scanned the airwaves to see if there was some Wi-Fi that I could pick up, and BNP Paribas had open Wi-Fi for everybody, so had a pleasant hour catching up with social media and shooting messages off and finding out where I was and so on. If ever you're in France and you're stuck without data, the other place you can always get Wi-Fi, apart from McDonald's and BNP Paribas, is the French post office. If you go and sit outside the French post office, it will have public Wi-Fi that you can use. Anyway, after lunch, aiming for the city of Troyes, looking at the roads, keen to stay off the roads if I could, I decided to follow a canal path along the side of the river, which, although slightly meandering, would, I thought, at least have the advantage of being flat, right? Because by and large, canals and rivers don't go up and down hills. So I followed the path leading me down to the canal track, which started off fine and beautiful and wide and tarmac, and then became a little narrower and gravel and a little patchy here and there, and then the gravel ran out and it became mud, and then washboard mud, and then really just overgrown grass track. And I thought, if I stay on this, I am never going to get to Troyes. So pulled off that, did another map appreciation, shot down for a while another one of those Roman roads, which had a very wide, not cycle lane, but a very, very wide verge, let's say. So as much as it had thundering lorries, they were a good 6 foot away from me. And did that for maybe 5 miles, 10 miles, I don't know. But then the verge ran out. The hard shoulder, that's the phrase I've been scrabbling for. The hard shoulder ran out. And I'll tell you what, the French drivers, woof woof, the French drivers are incredibly polite towards cyclists, and you feel safer there than I have done in the UK. Feels like every time I go out in the UK there's close passes and aggressive driving. But if I carried on that road, I would have been an inconvenience to other road users, and we don't want that, do we? Thank you, pretty. So I pulled off, and then, if you can imagine, 2 parallel roads running east-west, and then 2 parallel roads running north-south. Paris is kind of the top left of the box those roads form, and Troyes at the bottom right of the boxes those roads form. And I thought, you know what, as long as I turn right here and keep heading generally southeast, and if I don't cross those major roads, then I'm going to end up in Troyes. That's pretty much what I did. I mean, it was a fair lick, and I was getting quite tired towards the end, having had at that stage 2 nights camping and quite a lot of beer on the first night and no beer on the second night. I ended up hitting the road that ran south into Troyes, about 15 miles north of it, and just started down when it started to spit, and then it started to rain properly, and then all hell broke loose, like the heavens absolutely opened, and I took cover under the awning of a little greengrocer's, and he invited me in. We chatted for a bit, as far as we could, with my terrible English and my terrible French and his much better English. But eventually the skies cleared, and it was time for me to push on, and so I did. And it was a super busy road running down into Troyes, but again, quick map appreciation, and half a mile, quarter of a mile off to the east was a minor road following exactly the same path, running parallel to the main road, meandering through all the villages. And I took that road, and that led me quite nicely into Troyes in the end, where I cycled around a little bit. Been in Troyes before, maybe 15, 20 years before, with wifey on a motorcycling holiday. For a one-night stop. It's convenient if you're motoring or motorcycling as a place to stop on the way into Europe. So I had a quick wander around town and then dived up to an ibis. The ibis, I think it said something like 75 euros a night. So I dived in and said, "Can I have one of your rooms, please?" And he said, "Yes, that'd be 125 euros. I said, "But it says 75 on the board." "Ah, yeah, but not tonight, sir." Or words to that effect, bastard. On the upside, the ibis let me keep my bicycle in my room, which I thought was generous, and apparently they're well known for doing that. So really safe and secure. It was nice to be in a bed for the night. And as many of these places are, it was just out of town on a bit of a retail park, and so had, as many retail parks do, a bunch of restaurants and a bar. And I went into a bar and drank my own body weight in beer. One of the tips that I had, either that night or next, I'm not sure, from a good cyclist friend, and I was talking about, on social media, talking about my navigation and how completely ineffective the tools were that I was using. He said, get a subscription to Strava, use Strava to navigate. And so I did do that, and I have done that since, and it's been pretty good actually. Although I would say I think that Strava bases its route recommendations on popularity, and cyclists, you masochist bastards, seem to like climbing hills. So if there are two routes and one is relatively flat and another involves an epic climb, guess which way Strava is routing you? Which is all well and good if you're out for a Sunday morning couple of hours, but a bit of a bugger if you're personally 20 or 30 kilos overweight and you've got 20 kilos of luggage. Anyway, live and learn, and it was an improvement. Car behind. Good night's sleep. Come on. There we go. Good night's sleep in Troyes. And then following the refreshed route recommendations that I was receiving, a brilliant day of cycling across country down to a town, I forget the name of the town now, but it had appeared on the itinerary of a professionally run cycling trip from Paris to Geneva. And so I thought, I'll go and have a look at it. If it's worth them stopping at, must be good. Night. I got there quite tired, about 7 o'clock at night. A couple of hours to daylight. Stopped for a beer, had 2 or 3 beers, and then went to look for a campsite that was just out of town. And by the time I got to the campsite, their bar was open, but their reception was shut. So again, I had a couple of beers, and I took myself out to the car park and just slept in the car park, which was fine and free. Camped by a massive reservoir, and it was very pretty. Wouldn't necessarily go back again with the family, and I can't now because they've all left home and grown up, but it was nice. And from there I cut across country. Again, didn't stay, that was another night out camping. So I cut across country. I forget the exact route or the town that we ended up in. I can look that up later. I just remember one epic climb where it was so long and so hot. I ended up taking my top off I'm just doing naked bib top cycling for my comfort and ease, and for material to embarrass my wife with later, which obviously has worked. Now, it's a few major climbs on that day, but on the upside, some really epic descents. And actually, maybe that's like idyllic, short, sharp, nasty climbs, but get them out of the way. And then gradual descents over mile after mile of gradual incline, which really help push you along your way. And we had a bit of that. Oh, I think it was Dijon. Ended up skirting through Dijon, taking a slight detour, getting a bit lost, having to come back on myself, finally picking up the right track. And then, so having done all the rolling countryside, I did a 20 miles or so down a canal path, a long straight canal path, which was really nice cycling, like steady, easy cycling. Managed to run over a snake, both wheels, missed, I did have a GoPro, but I wasn't recording at the time, so I don't know who was more surprised, me or the snake. I hope it was all right. I wish no ill to it. Did at one point feel really bloody hot and unwell, and stopped in the shade for a few minutes and finished off the last of my water. But then, like, what are you going to do? You've got to push on. So pushed on, and finally found a shop. Oh, found a shop near my hotel. Stopped and bought a couple of large bottles of water and a couple of large bottles of beer. Wasn't sure if they'd have room for it. There's another ibis. That's on the right there. That's a parachute regiment memorial to the guys that were billeted here before they flew to Arnhem. Anyway, by the by, got to the ibis. They had a room. Hurrah! And booked in. And again, restaurant, like 100 meters away. So I went there, and I realized at this stage that by ordering a jug of beer, sort of 4 pints or 5 pints or whatever it was, rather than individual beers, that was a big saving. So I asked the waitress if she'd give me a jug of beer. I said, but where are your friends? I said, it's just me. Will you drink it all? Oh, yes. My word, I'll drink it all. So I had a jug of beer and a pizza and got myself to bed. And the next day was sort of the end of the flattish part of the route, and I think from there, then starting to roll into the forestry and the foothills before you get into the mountains proper. I popped into town there. Was it Dijon? Yeah, I popped into the town there to go and get a pair of gloves. I was getting a bit of numbness in the hands, and I had cycling gloves, but they weren't that much cop. There's a difference between popping out for a 20-mile bike ride every few days and sitting for 10 hours a day on the bike. And I now know that a decent set of cycling gloves will have padding to provide some separation between the nerve that runs down the centre of the palm of your hand and the handlebars. I popped out to the Decathlon and bought myself a set of gloves. Now, Decathlons are everywhere. Really great value there, and good value gear. Anyway, it was then after I picked up my new gloves, very pretty town as well. It was then time to head off southbound for the mountains. I'm going to stop in a minute and just check that we're still recording. Otherwise, I'll just be entertaining myself with nothing to show for it at the end.